Conquest of Elysium 5 is the gaming equivalent of taking a handful of unlabeled medications. You never know what's going to happen, but it usually ends with you staggering into a coal mine and strangling the life out of a helpless dwarf. That is all to say, it's one of my favorite games. You play as one of dozens of factions, ranging from a clinically insane necromancer to a Roman emperor commanding thousands of soldiers. The goal is to establish cultural and societal supremacy over everyone who is unlucky enough not to pick the same race as you. Because when I play as the Monkey Maharaj, the mere existence of a non-banana based economy is enough to make me do terrible, terrible things. To best demonstrate this, we're going to be playing as the High Cultist, a Lovecraftian faction which uses human sacrifice to summon deep-sea monstrosities. But before we do that, I have to tell you something. Between 1978 and 1995, I was mailing a lot of packages to universities and airports. But you know what I wish I was doing instead of that? Playing Terrasland, the sponsor of today's video. Terrasland is a new MMORPG available on PC and also on mobile, which I appreciate greatly because I was once kidnapped, hogtied, and stuffed in the trunk of a sedan. But luckily, I was able to wiggle my phone out of my pocket so I could spend my last 4% battery life farming the merfolk swamps for copper. But it gets even better because Terrasland is introducing a legendary dungeon tournament where you can form a team with your friends and compete against others for excellent rewards. The classes are diverse. The very concept of warrior exists on a spectrum because there are 3 warrior archetypes, each with 2 specializations, all of which can be augmented by one of 5 professions. The customization is so good that there's even a bard build dedicated to completing endgame content by yourself, which has allowed me to finally reify my antisocial personality disorder. However, that's beside the point, because the world before us is vast and beautiful. It features several puzzles, unique combat mechanics, and challenging raid bosses, such as the Blight Dragon, who will not hesitate to destroy you. But you don't have to go alone, because Terrasland's cross-platform data sharing means you can play with your friends anytime and anywhere. So go ahead and use the link in the pinned comment, or scan my QR code to download Terrasland and join the fun today. Now, back to the video. So I added a total of 11 enemy factions for us to compete against, and then started the game. This is objectively the most dangerous part of the campaign, because we start with only 1 city and a dozen soldiers, and it is not at all uncommon to lose the game on turn 1, after being invaded by a gang of territorially aggressive caribou. The wildlife of Elysium is so dominant, so predatory, that I had to go ahead and install a suicide prevention mod to ensure we don't lose 70% of the players within the first 10 turns. I cannot express how profoundly disappointing it is for an enemy faction to be demolished on turn 1 by 3 carpenter ants, but it happens all the time. On the upside, we got pretty lucky because our main cultist has the spell Soul Slay. It's single target and does between 1 and 999 damage.
Now that's a lot of damage!
So when I'm adventuring through the jungle and get ambushed by a singular monkey, I can obliterate him for 119 times his maximum health. Our primary concern at this point is subjugating towns and small villages so they can provide us with this red resource known as ritual sacrifices. For my purposes, I focused on assimilating the tribal villages to the south, primarily because their defense budget is measured in Chuck E. Cheese fun tokens, which makes them an exceptionally easy target. But they weren't too happy about me cutting them open with a ritual dagger, and on more than one occasion I was ambushed by tribes of pygmies with poisonous blowguns. Oh, and they also attacked me with a herd of elephants. However, my cultist has an ability called Confuse, and after casting it 20 times, I made this elephant so profoundly demented that he experienced some kind of ego death and decided to change teams. Following this ultimate betrayal, I knew I had crushed the tribal spirit, and fortunately so, because the other factions had started appearing, such as a group of cave-dwelling involuntary celibates known as the Pale Ones. I approached their leader with one of my diplomats, and he was quickly impaled for 200% of his max health. That was when I started to suspect some tension between our factions. At present, we stand no chance against our unshowered adversaries, but I've got a plan. You see, at the very south of the map, I found the Capitolium. It's a megacity comprised of 4 quadrants, one of which is the slums, an area absolutely infested with poor people, and I want to get those people off the streets and on to a sacrificial altar. So I started summoning an army by muttering incomprehensible gibberish into the ocean.
I'll eat your ass. I will.
And eventually, these things showed up. They're called Yithians, and they're very powerful spellcasters. So I took them, put them in my army, and declared war on poverty. Naturally, poverty lost, mostly due to a Yithian spell which I don't know the name of, but have affectionately dubbed Laser Beam Shotgun War Crime. As you may imagine, it's very effective at dispersing homeless vagrants. By this point, we controlled half the Capitolium and had doubled our sacrificial income, which I immediately used to summon a Basalt Princess. Some people will call her a disgusting fish freak monster mutant abomination. But she's also really useful. Thanks to the amphibious trait, she can walk out into the ocean, which allows her to cast Call of the Deep. It summons a wide variety of deep sea warriors, and after casting this 20 times, I had assembled the smelliest army known to man. I then leveraged this newfound strength to assault the rest of the Capitolium, starting with the Holy District. Here, I lost about half of my army to some senile dickhead who was spamming level 3 white magic. Fortunately, we were able to use our void magic to bend his mind into submission, which solidified my monopoly on the shotgun war crime market. As a reward for taking the district, we were also given several powerful artifacts, one of which was a magical scroll. I had my cultist use it, and it teleported him straight to hell, where he was immediately attacked by demons and burned alive. I wish I could say this was an uncommon occurrence in Elysium, but it's really not. Also, it's at this point I realized that I forgot to turn off stream notifications in OBS, because whenever someone subscribed to my Twitch account, the recording would be interrupted by this.
Guys, the penis pump actually works. It inflated my cock 4 times the size.
How lovely. By now, our sacrifice income is at 35, which is great. However, we're still losing territory to Blue, who is the demonologist, and also to Green, who is the Troll King. But there's something neither of them know, which is that I've started saving up sacrifices to unlock a grand ritual titled Call Outer God. I don't know exactly what it does, but I'm willing to kill a lot of people to find out. Well, I say people, but really I just found the Monkey Maharaj and beat the shit out of him until I had enough sacrifices, at which point I took my Basalt Queen to a lake and began the ritual, which allowed me to summon something. A complex protein structure, or maybe a collection of marbles, I'm not really sure, but I do know he has the highest level void magic in the game. So obviously I had to find a victim to test this on, which was when I stumbled upon the Markgraf. He's basically just a gnome, which is basically a dwarf, which is literally not even human. So I felt he, of all people, deserved this. I besieged his castle and quickly realized our god has a trait which makes him immune to all physical damage. Also, he can teleport across the map, call in orbital ion beams, and cast Mind Vortex for a map-wide paralyzation. Following this singular battle, the Markgraf basically just gave up and left the game, and I don't blame him. I felt as though this unit, this god, was fundamentally broken on a gameplay level, so obviously I wanted to abuse it as much as possible. I used God to enslave hundreds of illiterate tribesmen, which allowed me to summon even more gods, such as Hastur, the King in Yellow. As it turns out, Hastur is pretty powerful as well. In fact, I tried to summon a third god, but summoning in this game requires you to account for several things, ranging from the cultist's zodiac sign to the exact dilation of his anus at the moment of casting. And when I forgot to check whether Venus was in retrograde, this third god decided that he would like to kill me, only for Hastur to one-shot him on the first turn. Also, he can cast Strange Dimensions and Read the Stars to buff all of my units for an 87% chance to avoid physical damage. This near physical invincibility led to a high cultist renaissance, because my immediate neighbors are a sect of cavemen and also some kind of monkey society whose concept of magic is just weaponizing their own feces. So I had no problem relegating them to the fossil record alongside the Markgraf. I did run into some slight complications when Francois the demonologist, God, I don't know how to say this. He killed God by lighting him on fire. But other than that, things were going great, and I was summoning dozens of fish warriors every single turn, which I promptly and violently rammed down Francois' throat, slowly crushing his demon empire one battle at a time. Honestly, we got pretty lucky killing the demonologist before he could summon anything too nasty. However, we weren't so fortunate with the necromancer, because I just ran into him and he already has a Tartarian spirit along with several soulless giants. Also, he has a 50 30-foot tall pyramid made out of human skulls, so take that how you will. Now, a better general, a more thoughtful tactician, or even a small child could have probably come up with a realistic plan to deal with this threat, but me, I just wanted to smash into it head first, and it didn't go very well, because his Death Knights began spreading the bubonic plague among my army, which caused my units to slowly decompose every turn. However, this was honestly the preferable method of execution, because if you didn't die from this, you were being pulled apart by the talons of an undead hawk, or you'd get smoked in the face with a bolt of unlife, which instantly turns you into a zombie. The only magic trick we were consistently pulling off was summoning small angry puddles of water. This probably goes without saying, but we lost that battle pretty badly, and it might look like we inflicted a lot of damage, but after a battle, the necromancer can summon the dead bodies of all the combatants, and since this was a pretty big fight, he'll get a lot of units. The upside is that the necromancer has a mechanic called insanity. Turns out raising thousands of dead bodies and communing with Satan isn't exactly great for one's mental health. And the more he does this, the higher his insanity meter goes, meaning that sometimes his commander will just start shitting his pants and refusing to take any orders for months or even years at a time. For this reason, I recommend treating your necromancers like members of an Eskimo tribe, because when they outlive their usefulness, just wait until winter, take them to a frozen body of water, and leave them there. By springtime, the ice will melt and they'll die an honorable death of drowning in a river. Also, consider that your warning, because most units in this game can't swim. And if you're not careful, you'll be forced to watch in horror as your entire army of 300 soldiers drowns to death in 2 inches of water. Anyway, I had to do some rebuilding after this battle, and I didn't see the necromancer for a while, but what I did see was even more blood-curdling. It was none other than the subhuman menace known as the dwarves. I strongly dislike this faction, because when I gaze upon their stunted limb development, I can't help but feel as though they're a mockery of the human form. In fact, it's basically blackface for all of mankind. But the thing I love about Conquest of Elysium is that it establishes canonically that dwarves are literally insects, freakish bugmen that emerge from subterranean hatcheries. Say what you want about the idea of a short, naked, wrinkly man wriggling his way out of an egg sack, but it is the only dwarven lore that I'm willing to accept. I knew it was my moral responsibility to genocide the dwarves, but with my main army decimated by an insane man in adult diapers, I had to get fairly creative. So I summoned some unique units called Starspawn. Please believe me when I tell you that much like women, these units exist solely to increase the global suffering index. Where a normal cultist could spend 50 sacrifices to summon a sea monster into your stack, a Starspawn can spend 10 sacrifices to summon a void demon into the enemy stack. But before you get jealous, I want to remind you that void demons are absolute bastards. They'll kill anyone, even us, and furthermore, the accuracy of this spell is atrocious. So when I attempt to summon a demon in a dwarven settlement, there is a non-zero chance of me accidentally conjuring a giant carnivorous worm on any random person within a 3-mile radius. But remember, there's no such thing as innocent bystanders, only potential enemies. Luckily, the ritual has infinite range, which allows us to mitigate the risk of killing ourselves by simply using a clairvoyance spell to locate distant enemy settlements, and then abusing our same-day delivery to bombard them with abominations from beyond the stars. Using this technique, I gradually converted the dwarf starting area into a military exclusion zone teeming with Lovecraftian horrors. With my civic duty now taken care of, I had to begin preparing for round 2 with the necromancer. To do this, I'd need more sacrifices, and I was prepared to find them wherever I could. For example, I used the shovel of the Mole King to burrow underground and kidnap several Neanderthals. I also teleported back to Hell in an attempt to recycle my previous sacrifices. This was met with very limited success. After this, we went to the Void Realm. That was also a mistake. Before finally using a magic beanstalk to ascend into the heavens and subjugate entire races of cloud-based organisms. The cumulative benefits of us conquering heaven, hell, and some rock-eating savages had allowed me to rebuild my armies and continue my jihad against the elderly. I fanned out across the necromancer's territory looking for his main stack, and oh boy, I found it. Some of my scouts ran into him, at which point I realized he had taken all of the dead bodies from the previous battle and sewn them together into one giant flesh ball. In addition to being able to fist us to death, this hulking abomination can also cast Incorporate to consume 3 units at at a time, assimilating them into its biomass and permanently gaining maximum health. This scales indefinitely, meaning that if I don't kill him soon, there's going to be an unstoppable fisting machine wearing out my asshole like he's some kind of chiropractologist. By the time I tracked him down with my main army, he had not one but two of these freakish monstrosities, and they had increased their max health from 131 to 243. Also, the necromancer himself had undergone a ritual to transform into a vampire lord, which made him a far more intimidating presence compared to his previous form as an old man covered in his own feces.
I was going to foot him.
But on our side of the field, I had, 8 different gods, so I'd say we've got a pretty good shot. The battle began with both sides casting AoE magic. However, my units are so bricked up with magic resistance that trying to damage them with spells is about as effective as trying to fill out your tax return using the spare letters from a can of Alpha-Getty, which is to say it's not going to work and you're going to feel terribly silly for trying while I beat you with a belt as punishment. Accordingly, we quickly thinned out the enemy ranks, at which point my Eldritch Abominations took turns smacking his arts and crafts projects for upwards of 100 damage each turn. It wasn't long before the Necromancer was the only one left. With a massive chest wound and both of his eyeballs ripped from their sockets, he lasted about 12 seconds before succumbing to tentacle-related injuries. Avenging my loss to the Necromancer awarded me with about 1 million magical items as well as a surprisingly quick erection. Very nice. Now, you'd think having both of your eyes torn from your skull and your body crushed by a large phallus would probably be the end of you, and you'd be right in most cases, but the Necromancer had established a phylactery, which allows his body to reform once a month. So I spent the next 8 months ripping him limb from limb until I had finally found the phylactery and destroyed it, thus eliminating his faction permanently. With our geriatric friend now decomposing in a rain gutter, his empire was ripe for the taking, and take we did. But it wasn't enough, because just like how a furry inflationist feels a deep physiological need to pump himself until his distended gut resembles a hot air balloon, I too feel the need to expand. So I pushed even further, eliminating some minor players such as the Baron, who up to this point had spent the entire game hiding in his castle. After about 20 turns of this, I controlled almost the entire map, apart from the northwestern quadrant which was still governed by the Troll King. His armies are notoriously deceptive, because when you look at them, you'll see about a dozen random ogres and trolls, but when you go to fight them, you'll quickly realize there was over 100 goblins camouflaged into the tall grass, and now you're fucked. Not only that, but the trolls have the very forest itself on their side, because they go around planting physically aggressive fungus as well as violent shrubbery. By itself, this isn't a big deal, but much like shoving fistfuls of marbles up your nose, the attrition will slowly start to wear you down. Eventually, I tracked down their main army hiding in the forest doing tribal dances and eating mud. This behavior is indicative of the top 1% IQ in troll society. I wasted no time ramming my doom stack into his, no lubrication. He had a lindworm, several trolls, ogres, and a few hundred goblins, which I quickly turned to ash on the very first turn. You could say the fight wasn't going very well for him. About the only thing he was doing right was using his shaman to summon dozens of toads in my back line. Don't worry, the toads are relatively harmless. However, in attempting to kill them, I friendly fired about 50 of my own soldiers. But after mopping my guys off the floor, we smacked the troll shaman with a fat, girthy tentacle and called it a day. With his main army defeated, I had no problem running through his territory and destroying everything else. At the end of the day, the anatomy of 100 goblins is just no match for the sledgehammer that is an Eldritch Abomination, and after 10 turns, his faction went extinct, thus yielding the entire campaign map under our control. This is usually where a victory screen appears, but for some reason, I didn't get one. I wandered around for a few turns before realizing someone is still alive, and they're hiding from me. Now, there are several planes of existence in Elysium, such as Hell and the Void, but if they were hiding there, they'd probably already be dead. So I began using a magic shovel to tunnel underground and search for them, and that's when I came across this, a fledgling Pale One outpost where several troglodytes have barricaded themselves underground in an effort to survive my expansionism, but all must be assimilated, and assimilated they were. With the Pale Ones now officially defeated, we're given a victory screen and directed to the score graphs, where we are invited to generously fillet ourselves over just how excellent our empire was. You can see the only faction that was even close to us was the trolls, and well, they're still like half our strength. So that does it for this video. We've used human sacrifice and about 12 pixels to subjugate the world and usher in the age of fish people. I want to thank this month's patrons for supporting the channel, and finally, thank you for watching.